Well, hey there, YouTube. It's Petey Two Finger, and I haven't been around for a while. I've been kind of taking it easy. We started making music again. I was in a phase of heavy duty DIY electronics. We did a bass preamp, and then I did an amplifier that was JFET clone of a Marshall FET preamp, and then a spring reverb tank, and a 100-watt Chinese Class D power amp section. Little chip that you order, a little board that you slap in the box as an afterthought that provides the power section. Anyway, that's done. The bass preamp's working great. That has a I've talked about this a lot. It's got a JFET buffer. It's got a Electro-Harmonix bass balls that I didn't build. Picture Me Photon built that and sent it to me in a pedal form, and I took it apart and put just the circuit board in this. You can bypass that with a toggle. Then there's a Demeter compulator, and we tried a few different compressors in there. Then there's a DOD 250. We tried a few different distortions in there. Then there's a B blender, so you can blend in the amount of distortion. We tried a few different blend circuits in there. Then there's an NE1, not an NE1. We tried an NE1. There was a lot of building circuits, and then I wasn't really so hot on it. Like, one of the knobs on the circuit didn't do much, so you just leave it at noon, and that's to me that's a compromise. It's like, what is that knob for? You know, it needs to do something. And so we ended up with a Baxendal EQ, which is just a bass and treble EQ. So the last stage has a master volume and then a bass treble, and then I pretty much went for no compromise. And you know, my DIY thing, my experience with do-it-yourself pedals has been that the dime a dozen circuits, when you get into this, you hear about mojo components, and then there's a lot of people that say that's not true because, see, there's a lot of hype around a lot of stuff that isn't true. But then you start to learn, like people will say that a capacitor, it doesn't matter what type of capacitor you use, okay? But then you read further, and you read people that have built circuits with common components, and then they've built a version of it that uses like paper and oil capacitors, and there's a huge difference. Then you go and you start playing around for yourself, and you learn that in certain circuits with certain instances, I can hear the difference. I can hear the difference. And we're not talking about differences in values of capacitors, because regarding how accurate my capacitance meter is, if I'm testing against the same parts, it's going to give me a true reading. So anyway, my speech is that, yeah, I've been down the road of DIY. I've built a lot of circuits. I've only boxed up a handful of the stuff. I built a lot of stuff I didn't box up, simply because you read the build reports or you watch the demos, and then when you actually build it, you find that it wasn't for you. And I mean, you can't trust a demo. You can't trust a demo. Most of the good demos, it's what you're hearing is this guy can really play, and he's got a really good sounding amp and a really good sounding guitar, and couple that with a really good sounding playing technique, any pedal is going to sound good. So I'm leaning towards building stuff that's stand out. Like, if I'm going to build something now at this point, I want it to be I want to play around with higher end stuff. I want to get I want to lean towards I'm building exceptional circuits and then using good quality parts, you know. So that's kind of where I've been at. I've got on my list, I've got a Shin-A companion number 6. Now, Shin-A made the... they were making fuzzes and other people were putting their name on it, so the original... what is it called? Super Fuzz. Univox Super Fuzz was originally supposedly made by Shin-A. Now, I know that the Shin-A Companion 6 is a different circuit than the Super Fuzz. And, you know, not everybody likes that. I gotta be honest with you. My buddy Pigster doesn't like it. Does not like that circuit. I loved it. I built a... Fuzz Dog was the name of the company that sold me the PCB. I built a Univox Super Fuzz, and I spent a lot of time reading about transistor values. And one of the guys had gotten a unit from an original Univox Super Fuzz from this guy who was in a band called Monster Magnet, I think, or it might have been one of those bands. Fu Manchu, I think it was. And that's their whole thing, is that pedal. There are a handful of bands that use that Super Fuzz. That's their whole thing. Electric Wizard used it on a few albums. It's a very distinctive, and it's just an insane fuzz. It really is. Well, this guy had gotten a hold of an original and tested the numbers on the transistors. And I went through trying all kinds of different people's advices and taking a lot of notes and measuring and trying a lot of transistors, trying to get close to what I heard. And to be honest with you, I was happiest when I nailed the numbers that the guy gave for the Fu Manchu guy's pedal, because that's what sounded the best to me. It really did. I mean, I don't exactly remember everything about that process. It was a few years ago, but I just remember being really happy with it. And the pedal is, it's an excellent pedal. Now, Boss cloned that, and rather than use transistors, they changed the circuit to op-amp. So it's pretty much like the same thing, but it's a whole different topology. So that thing is called the FZ2, the Roland Boss Fuzz 2. And it's kind of an unobtainium, like it wasn't around for a while. Some famous people used it. It's got a reputation, and then it went away. So, the Hyper Fuzz, I think it's called. Because the clone of it is called the Hyped Fuzz. Get it? So I bought a PCB for the Hyper Fuzz because I really love the Univox Super Fuzz sound, and I thought, gee, I betcha this op-amp version is going to be killer. Because one of the first lessons I learned in DIY was don't always go down that path of thinking like, oh, the transistor is going to always be way better than the chip. Because a tube is better than, like, the best thing is germanium transistors, or the best thing is a tube. Well, each one of those things has their own place and their own flavor, their own soul, their own sound, their own characteristics. Whether or not they're better than the next thing is up to you. Because they're just different, and that's what you learn when you are not so much reading what other people say. When people come in contact with a rare pedal, they are going to go on and say whatever they can say to elevate themselves, to elevate the value of their pedal. So you can't really listen to anything that anybody says online. because everyone, it depends on what they have on their board at the time. Like, a good example is tuners. If somebody bought a Boss tuner, they're going to swear by the Boss tuner. If somebody bought a pitch black, they're going to swear by the pitch black. It's just how our minds work as human beings. We never stop for a second to think and consider, well, hey, I've never really tried any other tuner. And maybe me trying to sell everyone when it comes up on a forum post vehemently to purchase a pitch black is just coming from my lack of experience in any other tuner. And that's the type of DIY, that's the type of forum behavior that I'm on about, that makes me see red, that pushes my buttons, etc., etc., etc. And that's the type of person that I don't want to be. I want to be the guy that can be honest with myself, and that's very freeing. That frees me to not get so hung up and be like, anytime I'm going to use a fuzz, I have to use my Maestro, my original Maestro FC1A, because it's not that good of a fuzz. I'll be honest, maybe the one that you have is great, your FZ1, but mine leaves a little bit to be desired. I built a silicon fuzz kit that cost $19 that smokes it and gets very similar tones. It's less noisy, it's cleaner sounding, it does the same thing, but way more versatile. And it's got more, if you want it. So, I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, I could gut that FC1 and put one of those $19 kit fuzzes in there. And then you could have it on your board, and ooh, it would look, you people would see it and go, oh, look at that, he's got that old fuzz. And man, does it sound good. Anyway, the guy who does the forum, Mark, there's Mirosol, and then he spells his name with two, are they lowercase L's with a small V, so it looks like Mark? Looks like a big, giant M. Anyway, that's the guy over at Tagboard Effects, and that's the place where it's the #1 place on the internet for people who build pedals, okay? When you're talking about buying a PCB, you go to Pedal PCB, Guitar PCB, Fuzz Dog, and Ion, however you say it, any number of these places, and purchase a circuit board that has everything labeled out on it, and then you buy the parts that are on a list. You order those parts, and then you solder them in. The other way of doing it is strip board, and that's where it's just a board with strips of copper, and you kind of, someone, Mark or Mirasol, I'm not sure who, I'm not great on the names. I know they've got some new people over there working over there. They were really rocking and rolling for a while. They kind of hit a wall. Every once in a while some more will come now. They did some preamp stuff, but anyway, the strip board layouts are, you buy a Vero board or its strip board, and you remove some of the holes with a drill bit, and then you'll use some jumper wires that you solder in. But pretty much you can build any, it's considered a prototype board. So you can build on Vero, and what you need is a layout to tell you where each component goes. So that's the internet's repository of people that have reverse engineered guitar pedals, or just built them, designed their own circuit on Vero. For the most part, this place, Tagboard Effects, is reverse engineered stuff. It's stuff that you would normally go and purchase a pedal. Here, instead of purchasing it, you can go ahead and build your own clone of it. Now, typically, they don't have a lot of mojo builds. Their builds are mostly parts that are easily obtainable, parts that you can get. Then they have some more unique stuff where you're going to have to hunt down some germanium transistors. The one that stands out to me, if you look up the King of Tone, which the King of Tone is there's a 17-month wait on it. It's a guy who calls himself Analog Man, I think is the guy that makes those. Basically, he got a hold of a pedal called a Marshall Blues Breaker, which is a really good overdrive. And he went in there and saw some things that he didn't like. You know, it's made by Marshall, and they're going to pretty much, a company is not going to go out of their way and buy mojo, expensive components for their pedal builds. So he goes in there and sees, hey, you know what, some of these parts are really cheap and crappy. I can do a little better job at the circuit. So he went nuts on it. And when he got done, he had almost kind of done so much to it that it was redesigned and it was kind of become its own thing, even though it started out as a blues breaker. And I believe what he does, he puts two of them in one box, and you can turn one on and then turn the other one on. And when you have them both on, that's, you know, it's basically adding stages to your amp. These are, they're not really high gain, they're lower gain overdrives that when you click two of them on, it's not completely insane. It's not like spitting and hissing and you need a noise gate because they're relatively low gain. They're really clean boosting with a little bit of dirt, a little bit of clipping. So it's a cork sniffer pedal. This isn't something that the 17-year-old guitar player is going to know about. This is for blues lawyers, tone pros, people who've played, people who know, people who collect pedals. You don't walk into a Guitar Center and see an analog Man King of Tone. You just don't see it. Like I said, there's a 17-month waiting list on it. And when you go to Tagboard Effects, as I've done, and read, he doesn't really like it. The guy who Mark, the guy who does the work there, who's designing all of these, or coming up with the layouts, converting schematic to Vero layout. So he's building all of this stuff. He knows, and he's a little bit more. I tend to believe him, because he doesn't really talk much trash. He doesn't talk much about circuits. There's one circuit that he talks about, and that's the Clark gainster. So this has gotten really long. I'm going to make this a two-parter. I just call this a tone talk. The gist of it is I'm going to be building Clark gainster, and I'm going to go for it with mojo parts. So that means buying Russian paper and oil capacitors, using some of my stock of my old Spragues, Allen Bradley half-watt carbon comp resistors, big giant resistors. It's going to be a big deal for me because ordering all of the parts, paying all the shipping. It uses a special op amp. I don't even have... It's like this build is going to be really a leap of faith for me. So I'm looking for a partner who would like their own Clark gainster, who's going to team up with me and, I don't know, PayPal me $60 and you'll get a gainster. How does that sound? So we'll talk more about it in the next episode. I think that's more than fair. I've got to limit the offer to probably just one person. I'm probably going to make 3. But we'll talk more about that in the next episode. I didn't want to make this over 20 minutes, so if you're interested, come back. If not, I hope you enjoyed the talk. Peace.